There is something that Joseph does at the end of the parasha, the end of the Book of Bereishit, which Chazal, our sages, see as a tremendous example of kindness and sensitivity, and an example par excellence of how we should all behave. The concept that Chazal talk about is called Latzeit Yedei Habriot. It's mentioned in the Midrashim, to be concerned and sensitive to the needs and views of others. Look how sensitive Yosef is. At the end of his life, there is this. At the end of the Book of Bereishit, there's this remarkable interaction where they're returning from the burial of Yaakov, of their father, in Canaan, and they come back, and it says that the brothers were concerned that now that their great father had died, now perhaps it would be a time that Joseph would get even with them, that Joseph would, God forbid, kill them for the iniquity all those years ago, the terrible sin of selling Yosef. It seems that they believed as long as their father was alive, he wouldn't do it. But after he had passed away, perhaps he would. And Chazal say, what brought on the brothers to do this? Yes, Yaakov has passed away. But what made the brothers now, all of a sudden, after all of these years and decades with Yosef, 17 years since they arrived in Egypt, think that Yosef will now get even with them? And Chazal give a number of answers. And one of the answers given in the Tanchuma, incredibly, they say that the brothers saw Yosef when they went to bury their father in Egypt. They saw Yosef stopping at the pit that they had thrown him in and offering a prayer, reflecting at the pit, saying a prayer, actually a beracha, that Hashem had saved him in this place. The brothers at a distance perhaps thought, when they were reflecting on this, maybe Yosef had remembered the trauma. Maybe he had never forgiven them. The truth is that the brothers, all these decades, were constantly plagued, ignored at their conscience, the terrible thing they had done in selling Yosef all these years ago. And therefore did not take much for the brothers to be reminded, seeing Yosef by the pit, being reminded of the terrible thing they had done. And perhaps now that their father had passed away and he was grieving, maybe he now would get even with them. And incredibly, what does Yosef do? In attempt after attempt, Chazal see an example of such sensitivity. He explains to them that he's not in the place of God and that things turned out for the best. And after all of his claims and puts their mind to rest, he says the following, Vayenachem otam, he sits with them and consoles them, Vayedaber al libam, and he spoke to their heart. What could he possibly do more than console them? What is this speaking to their heart? Chazal say it's an example of understanding the needs and concerns of others and sitting with them until they are consoled and feel that all of their concerns are laid aside. That is the sensitivity that we need. Chazal tell us in a well-known halacha that one's never supposed to remind a person who sinned. It's called onat varim. A person who did something terrible. You shouldn't be the one to remind them of that. You should not be the one to conjure up images for that person which makes them feel bad. Here Joseph does more than that. Not only is he not the one who did it, they did it on their own and it's got nothing to do with him. Yet he goes out of their way to make sure. Rashi brings 3 different arguments of how he speaks to them and all types of arguments to lay their minds to rest and said, I'm 100% okay, and you are forgiven for these things that you did. Even though it's still gnawing at you decades later, you have been forgiven. What kindness and what sensitivity. May we all be like Yosef, to emulate this example, that when people have concerns about us, thoughts about us that we know may not be true, or may at least that they are deeply worried about things about themselves in their relationship with us, that we go out of our way to make peace between people, to put people's minds to rest, to have hypersensitivity to the needs of others, in order that we can all move on together in a united, sensitive, kind way in all our human interactions. Shabbat Shalom.